Hello, good afternoon. My name's Aid Taylor, and I am here with Amy Stokes-Waters and Ali Turnbull, and we are going to talk a little bit this afternoon about proactivity and specifically about using the Microsoft Sentinel platform to do some proactive threat hunting and to take a different approach to what you may have associated with proactivity in the past, just to unpick that a little bit. So before we start, can I ask both of you, starting with Amy, just to do a quick introduction of yourselves, please?
Hi everyone. I'll flip the slide so we can see everyone's name. That might be a bit easier. So my name's Amy Stokes-Waters, and as it says there, I am a technical sales specialist at Identity Experts. So I work in our sales team, supporting customers who are looking at Azure Sentinel as well as other MS security products, and sort of giving them kind of an overview of how those solutions could fit in with their environment and kind of the benefits and how we can help them.
Thank you very much, Amy. And Ali, if you could just give us a few words about yourself.
Sure. So I'm Ali Turnbull. I'm a cloud solution architect, and I work with partners around security and compliance. So my role is to help partners like Identity Experts and ITC Secure build solutions for our customers, so our joint customers. So I work with them to focus on everything from Azure Sentinel all the way across to compliance, anything on the Microsoft 365 platform. At all, really. So yeah, we're here today to talk about Azure Sentinel, I believe.
We are indeed. Thank you very much for that. Thanks, both of you. I suppose it might help if I sort of said a little bit about what I did apart from just my name. So I'm the CTO of ITC Secure, and we are a managed security services provider. And one of the things we do, actually, a very successful thing that we do, is a managed security service based on Microsoft Azure Sentinel, and actually on the wider Microsoft security stack as well. So just a brief couple of words about what Sentinel is, for those of you that haven't come across it. It's a SIEM, and if I sort of drag up from my dusty memory, that's security information event management, I think.
Security incident and event management, is it?
Is it incident? Okay.
I don't know. I don't know if they're interchangeable, to be honest.
Well, let's say it's what we'll do is we'll just mumble that bit, and then we'll be fine.
Yeah.
But basically, it's a platform for the, as I'm sure most of you will know, for the collection and correlation of data in the form of logs and reports, alerts from pretty much any source, really. The idea being that you have one central place to collect all your information and to correlate from different areas to see if you are actually experiencing a threat. And of course, once you have all that information in one place, SIEM is also an extremely good. You're in a good position with a SIEM to trigger automation, because you bring everything in centrally. You can take actions based on those events, and it gives you a very good picture of your overall exposure to risk. Now, that all sounds great, but I'm sure we've all got experience with SIEM platforms. They've been around a long time, and like all these things, are only as good as the configuration, right? And they're only as good as the amount of interpretation they can do of the incoming data. So quite a lot of them, we've certainly found, quite a lot of SIEMs are very expensive for the actual value that the end customer gets out of it. It's a tool we rely on as a managed service provider. It's the basis, it's the center of the world effectively for our MDR services. But I think as an end user, and certainly I've been in this situation, we invest a lot of money in licensing and the costs of event per second, which is typically how these things are billed, and you quite often don't feel like, or I certainly haven't felt in the past, like you're getting the value. So we've recently, because it's only really been available recently, we've implemented our MDR service based on a managed SIEM service based on Microsoft Sentinel. And the reason we've done that is there's many reasons actually, but the two main reasons are that it's cloud-based and it's built, it's fully integrated into Microsoft security stack. So it's got a very modern, clean approach to the UI. Obviously all Microsoft data is that you could possibly ingest is extremely well integrated into the platform. There's a bit of behavioral analytics built in. It works really well with Defender ATP on the endpoint. Reporting is slick. It's a very nice modern SIEM, even if that was the only way you wanted to look at it. But if you combine that with Microsoft's full security stack and the analytics layer and the reporting and automation that we're able to do, it's an extremely powerful platform, and enabling services based on it, in our experience, has been, I mean, it's unbelievably quicker than doing it with some traditional SIEMs that we've used in the past, and you know, that realistically we will still continue to use, because there is always a use case for non-Microsoft, of course. Sorry about that, Ali. So that's Sentinel. So I was wondering, actually, Amy, if I come to you first. So I've sort of talked about how great Sentinel is a bit, and I've talked about proactivity, but how does Sentinel actually help organizations to be proactive with threat detection?
That's a very good question. You're welcome. Did you come up with that one?
All on my own.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Sentinel, so it's a great product, but I think the beauty, you really can supercharge how fantastic it is when you kind of use it in conjunction with the M365 suite of technologies as well. Because then you can correlate data across multiple vectors. So if you're bringing in information from Intune, from Azure AD, from the MTP suites, that's the Microsoft Threat Protection Suite, you can help kind of discover, you can discover threats a lot more quickly. With the machine learning engine that sits in the background as well, you can then help to understand kind of what normal behavior looks like, and then highlight what isn't normal behavior, which then can then feed into kind of the automated threat response capabilities. So I think a lot of the power of the proactivity comes from that automated capacity that the solution's got. I mean, having like the single pane of glass view as well, obviously with any SIEM you get that. It gives you a more holistic view of events that are going on. So things that you might not necessarily think are related, you might, because you can see it in that single pane of glass, you've got a bit more of an ability to kind of understand what's going on in the environment, and maybe spend less time looking at multiple portals and more time doing some of that proactive stuff as well. Sure. If you've got some of your time freed up. I mean, and the cutting down of all the alerts means that, you know, when you're focusing on the kind of the important stuff as well. So I think that's, for me, that's where I think it helps you be a bit more proactive. You kind of got the data all in front of you for you to do something with. Thanks,
Amy. And is that, Ali, is that, you know, would you broadly corroborate that view? Or is, I mean, I'm fascinated really with how much kind of out of the box automation there is, which I think, you know, really helps in terms of our ability to act proactively, sensible decisions being taken automatically. But I mean, is that, do you concur with that generally?
Yeah, indeed. I think, I mean, there's only a couple of things I'd probably look to add is kind of really around the connectors as well. So, you know, being proactive across multiple different products is brilliant across a Microsoft 365 platform, but we can also do, we provide a lot of connectors out of the box for third parties, and we're consistently writing more and more of those. And if your connector that you're looking for to integrate from a third party perspective isn't there, you can also look to ingest and log using the Ceph format, so the common event format, or a syslog as well. So I think it really provides, you know, the third-party integration as well, as opposed to the Microsoft Threat Protection, which really just focuses on the Microsoft 365 platform. So one of the benefits of Sentinel, really, from an organization perspective, is that you can actually integrate the third-party logs. And then, obviously the automation around everything, as Amy mentioned before, there is so much pre-built analytics, and you can customize all your own queries using the KQL language, and start to kind of trigger and start using automated playbooks, by using logic apps. Mm-hmm. So really, there's a lot that we can start to do to be proactive.
So simply freeing up analyst time is a real contributing factor to proactivity. I think, and it sounds like what you two are both saying as well. We've got like every SOC, we've got a lot of clever people, sitting in our SOC 24 hours a day, and if the less they have to deal with routine stuff, the more they can go off threat hunting and taking proactive actions over and above what the platform can do proactively, right? It's just making better use of your people. And one of the things that you mentioned there was the integration. That feels to me like, with third parties, that feels to me like a very deliberate Microsoft thing. Now, I wouldn't have said, going back some years, I've been very pleasantly surprised at the level of support for non-Microsoft environments.
I was just going to say, Ali called me out quite well there, didn't she, as a massive Microsoft fangirl, because I always pretend that people don't have things other than Microsoft in their environment. But I think it's because I've worked with Microsoft for so long, and historically, like I think you were just about to say then, Ed, Microsoft stuff hasn't necessarily integrated that well with non-Microsoft stuff, but I think they've really flipped that on the head recently, with all these partnerships that developed over even over the last few months, so that there are those native integrators into, like you say, non-Microsoft technologies as well. Because as much as I would like to think that everyone just loves Microsoft as much as me, I'm sure other people use other things like maybe AWS or.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah, we've got a connector for AWS as well into Sentinel. I think that's something that I really like. I joined Microsoft a year ago, and I really like the fact that we're not just concentrating purely on Microsoft products. I think I came from partner land as well, and one of the biggest things that we had was that not everything was one thing. It wasn't all AWS, it wasn't all Microsoft. There's always a little bit of everything, and I think, Azure Sentinel in the direction from a security perspective, the way Microsoft is going around a lot of our other products, how we're managing to kind of manage all the third-party tools. I think it makes it a lot more flexible, and in this world of cloud, it's really required. That type of thinking isn't really helpful to anybody anymore. And I think from an alert perspective, being able to use something like Azure Sentinel to join all those third-party and look at third-party alerts that are coming in and looking at the correlation across all of those different tools, from an automation perspective, and actually really just being able to present the analyst with the right information all in one go, rather than them having to threat hunt against multiple different ones across multiple different products, is really, really, really helpful. We can cut down, the amount of time it's taking to look at those alerts, and it makes a big difference, I think, because you're never going to have enough people, to deal with all of the noise that's coming in. So without the automation and correlating all those alerts using the machine learning, it's just impossible. There's not enough people in the world to be able to deal with that.
Absolutely, and I think I just think it feels to me like a very forward-thinking ethos to, when Microsoft set out to design this platform, that there was obviously an early decision made that they were going to support things like AWS from the get-go, and you're right, that's the reality, right? I mean, none of our customers are just one thing. There's a bit of Mac, there's a bit of Linux, there's on-prem, there's off-prem, there's Google Cloud, and you end up with half a dozen tools, and that's not manageable for us as a dedicated SOC. So Christ knows how customers who've got a day job to do actually manage to deal with that level of input. Okay, cool, thank you. I mean, it's interesting actually. So one of the discussion points that we've gathered from the people that signed up to this is the benefits. If we talk a little bit about the benefits of proactivity versus reactivity, and when I first read that, I thought, well, it's obvious what the benefits of proactivity versus reactivity are, but actually maybe it's, you know, it's not quite as obvious as it sounds, because for me, proactivity in SIEM world and in SOC world means threat hunting. I mean, that's kind of it, if you like. It's kind of tied up with a ribbon on it for me. But if you expand, which is great. I mean, you see a thing and you go and look for that thing, you know, in your customers' estates to see if they have been compromised. You know, you look for indicators of compromise, whatever it is, and you run some automation that looks for it. You do it manually. You know, that for me is the proactive side, and of course it can help reduce any outcome from a cyber incident, reduce the duration of an outcome, an outage from a cyber incident. But these days, reactivity isn't just an alert pops up, you wait for an analyst to notice it and do something. You know, reactivity now is at machine speed, right? It's particularly with the tools that we have now. You know, if it's something which can be automated, then reactivity can be measured in seconds rather than, you know, SLA times of hours and days anyway.
That's quite a relief with some of the threats that we have nowadays that can kind of exfiltrate through some of your systems within a matter of minutes, rather than you know, needing to wait for someone.
Yeah, so I mean, what I think is, what I think I'm sort of finally getting around saying is that, you know, it's not, we're not saying that proactivity is better than reactivity. I think I'm not anyway. What I'm saying is they're both really important, but you also need to spend a lot of time on your reactivity. Please don't see it as a kind of backwards, you know, this is how we used to do it kind of thing, because it's not that. It's about getting your tools to take action for you.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of customers I do a lot of Microsoft security workshops. I mean, a lot. I think I've done about 30 of them this year. One of the questions that we always ask is whether people are proactively threat hunting within their environment, and 99.9%, whatever that works out of 30 people anyway, have all said no. No, most people are not doing, or they think they're not doing it.
I was going to ask that. Do they actually when you actually dig into it, do you find they are doing it?
I was going to say, they think they're not doing it, but then they're doing things like you've switched multi-factor authentication on. So that is a proactive step that you've taken in terms of threat remediation capabilities. So, I mean, it's not necessarily anything super sophisticated. And I hope everyone listening, I'm sure everyone who's listening to this webinar will have MFA switched on. And if you don't, naughty. But I mean, that's just kind of some of the steps that you can take to be proactive are things like just patching. Doesn't necessarily mean, like you said, like having to respond to some big attack, and hopefully people won't have to respond to a big attack because they're not going to get hit with stuff. But the way to stop yourself getting hit with things is to be proactive at stopping some, you know what I mean? So it's kind of I think it's a bit of a circle that you go around in.
Chicken and egg kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to be. I think sometimes reactivity can sound like, you know, you're waiting for the threat to become an issue before you're responding to it. So in some instances, you could maybe consider it as putting you kind of on the back foot. But there's lots of things, like I said, that you can do proactively that mean that you're more secure. So yeah, things like I said, like in MFAing or making sure your patching's up to date. You know, plugging some of the gaps before someone exploits them. It's not necessarily really complex things, or having someone sat there 24/7 searching through every single alert that you ever get.
And you know, I've got to say, in every webinar, in every customer facing meeting I do, I have to say machine learning and artificial intelligence at least once. It's the law, and of course there's you know, there's a lot to be gained from being integrated into a system which has things like behavioral analytics, for example, built in effectively. You know, because behavioral analytics is no longer reliant on a box you go and buy that does BA, or you know, a bit of software you buy that does BA. If you're collecting all this information, all these security logs from all these different sources, you can, I think you mentioned it, Amy, you can establish a baseline of what normal looks like. You're in a good position to do that. And so things like geographically impossible or time impossible travel, or weird devices, you can, with a SIEM, and particularly with Sentinel, you can overlay quite a good deal of sophisticated behavioral analytics, and that's I don't know whether that's proactive or reactive. It's just good. It's a bit of both, really, isn't it? And it means you don't have to buy loads of standalone stuff and integrate it. We're in this position now. We've got all this data coming in from all these different sources, and we've got an intelligent SIEM platform with access to cloud-based machine learning grunt. Without even knowing it, really, you enable some behavioral analytics. I think things are, I don't know, it feels quite a lot like things are sort of coalescing. Security services, systems, applications are kind of all coming closer together, closer to each other, in terms of just a security offering. That's how it feels to me anyway. You're needing less boxes to do more things, is what I think.
Yeah, definitely. I'm on that page.
Yeah, good. Well, that leads us on to the next point, was how are you proactive? I think we've talked about that. I mean, it's there's two things to it for me. One is you have proactive services and systems in place, because you can automate quite a lot of threat hunting as well, right? You can say, here are indicators of compromise, go and find them.
I think there's an initial step. I mean, I'm sure that you were going to say something. I'm sure this was the point you were going to make. If you did.
Be that sure. Carry on.
I was going to say the initial step to being proactive really is understanding your entire estate to begin with, because unless you know what you kind of got to protect, you kind of can't be proactive with protecting it. And I think a lot of people, when they're looking at security, I mean, as an example, when I do these security workshops, I always say to customers, so we're going to be talking about bring your own device. And they're all like, oh, we don't do that. We don't do bring your own device. No, we wouldn't have that in our organisation. Then you say to them, does anyone access the email on the mobile or on their own mobile? Oh, yeah, everyone does that. Right. So that's quite a big hole in your security environment if you've not considered what else are they accessing on the personal mobile? It's not. I'm presuming it's not. Most of the time, it's not just your email, then, is it? So I think taking that step back and really considering what you are protecting to start with is probably the first step in being proactive. Because if you don't know what you're protecting, there's no, you can't be proactive with it, can you?
Yeah. So I mean, that's asset management, effectively, is what you're talking about, isn't it? I guess. Sort of.
Well, yeah, I guess asset management, or maybe just even, I don't know, just maybe talking it through with just having a chat with somebody saying, does this count?
Yeah.
Yeah, Amy, I think you're dead right. I think that's really